Welcome to ACF Chefs Forum. We appreciate all you tuning in today for this webinar on barbecue with modern technique and global flavors. Our presenters will unveil the secrets of infusing modern barbecue with flavors from across the globe. ACF is excited to have experts here with information just for you, the leaders of the food service industry. Before we begin, as a note, we will be answering as many of your questions as possible after the presentation. Please use the chat function to collaborate with other viewers and use the Q&A function anytime during the session to pose questions to today's speakers. Let's get the discussion going on in the chat. Let's tell us where you're from and where you're tuning in from today. I'm Chris Tanner, American Culinary Federation's Executive Director. Let's talk about barbecue trends. So barbecue trends for this year is one of our top 10 trends. Barbecue is no longer about American regional barbecue. It's about infusing those global flavors into there. So whether you're from Southern India and you're making Southern barbecue in the Carolinas, infusing those flavors, or if you're from Korea and infusing American flavors along with Korean flavors, there's just Korean and American flavors together. There's all kinds of different things happening in barbecue today. One of my favorite places outside of Atlanta, Georgia, Heirloom Barbecue, is taking from the tradition of Korean barbecue from his wife and the Southern roots of the husband, who are taking those flavors and putting them together. And that's what our chef is here to talk about today. So let's meet today's presenter. ACF chef Greg Boggs is a senior chef for the food service team at Campbell's. His responsibilities include new product development, recipe and menu development, operator support, and the continuous development of Campbell's North America Food Service Culinary Trend Pulse program. Chef Greg is a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York. He has been with Campbell's for 11 years, working on a majority of the portfolio over that time. And I know this because he and I used to work together. So extremely happy to have him on with us today. When not working, Chef Greg is active in the competitive barbecue and food sport. He has won multiple grand championships and other awards over the last 5 years throughout the country. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Chef Greg. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chef Chris, and thanks, Stacey. I appreciate y'all having me. Happy to be here to talk about barbecue. Barbecue is definitely something that I love to do, and it's one of those things that if I could make a career out of, I'd probably try. But happy working here at Campbell's and doing the barbecue as kind of a side hobby, something to keep me occupied while I'm not working. So today, in following with the ACF trends, as Chef Chris mentioned, really want to kind of show how we can infuse some global flavors into our barbecue. But I also want to kind of show some modern techniques and really some techniques based around competition barbecue and the way I cook my barbecue for competition. So whether you're a seasoned pitmaster and you do this a lot, or you're just kind of learning and trying to figure it all out, hopefully I can give you some tips today and kind of help you either learn something new or get you on the right track to make some great barbecue at home, or if you're at a restaurant and try to up your game there and deliver some really nice, interesting, flavorful barbecue for your guests. So before we get into the meat, I really want to kind of talk about first, like the basics of barbecue, kind of what do you need to know to get started and to get you on the right track. The first one is you really have to learn your smoker. There's lots of different types of smokers out there, and that's really going to make a difference on how you go about cooking. So if you're cooking on an offset stick burner, that's going to be very different than you're cooking on a drum or a cabinet smoker or a water smoker or a big green egg or whatever it might be. So you really have to know your smoker, because I can only give you so much advice based on what I'm cooking with versus what you're going to be using. So you really have to kind of learn from experience and learn from what you've seen with your own smoker. That leads me to my second point, which is take notes. Take notes every time you cook. I keep a notebook in my trailer for competitions, and every morning when I wake up and light my pit on competition day, I take note of where I'm at, what the temperature is, what the wind is. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it humid? Is it dry? Those are all very important in the way your smoker is going to cook and the amount of moisture. And then, also keep track of what time things go on, what the temperature of the smoker is, if I'm having any kind of issues, with the way things are burning or cooking or the smoke or anything like that. And then I keep track of what time I'm taking things off to wrap, to finish times. And it's been a big help for me really kind of getting to know my equipment and the way my timeline works when it comes to my competition. But that's also important if you're cooking at home. The worst thing when you're cooking at home is for you to have people over and your food's not ready, and then you get panicked and you rush, and then that's usually when you pull something off too early and it's not ready to go, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. Next is all about seasoning. So obviously when you think about seasoning in barbecue, you're thinking about salt and barbecue rubs and brown sugar and that type of stuff, which is very important. You want to make sure that you don't overdo it at the beginning. That can affect your finished taste, whether it's too salty, too sweet, but it can always really mess with your color. It can really affect if you have a really light finished color or a dark finished color. That amount of rub or seasoning can really make a difference in that. So you really want to be careful. My motto for competition and for home is I might start a little bit lighter, but then I can finish strong. There's always things you can do at the end once the food's cooked to really up the flavor should you need to do that at that point. The other part of that is your wood. So the type of wood you use and the amount of smoke you're putting on your meat. That can make a big difference in color, flavor, and that type. So smoke, I consider that one of my ingredients when I'm smoking, because just like salt, if you over smoke it, it's not going to taste good. And to me, a lot of barbecue that I taste from people that are just learning and getting started, they put too much smoke on it. They think that they have to load the smoke on it and really go heavy. You really don't need to. You just need to have a nice balance, a nice kiss of smoke. And again, you can always add some smoke later once you're finished. So if you don't think you've got enough smoke, there's ways you can do that and add a little bit of extra smoke. Next is one I feel like a lot of people kind of miss, and you just don't think about it as you're cooking, is you have the ability to control your cook. Make sure that as things are going, if you see something that's not going right, do something to fix it. If it looks like it's getting too dark, wrap it. If it's not getting dark enough, maybe you can move it up a little bit in your smoker. Maybe there's a hot spot in the top of your smoker, or one side of your smoker is a little hotter. You can move the meat over to one side, and that can help you with your color or speed the cook up or whatever it might be. Don't just sit there and say, well, this is what the instructions or somebody told me to do, so I'll see what happens. Take some steps to be involved and make sure that you're controlling what you're cooking. You have that ability to make sure you take advantage of that. And lastly is don't be afraid to open the smoker and see what's happening. The old saying is if you're looking, you're not cooking. Well, that's true, but you also need to know what's going on. And if you open the smoker, yeah, it's going to add a few minutes to the end of your cook, but I would rather know what's happening in there than to just sit there for hours and hours and not have a clue what's happening just so I finish on time. The time you finish is when the time you finish. So if you have to be in there, you have to be in there and check it. And again, based on your smoker, some smokers will recover quicker with temperature than others. So just, again, know your smoker. That'll really help you, be on the right track. So with that, we're going to get in our first recipe. So we're going to be using a pork butt today. And I'm going to show you, this is not my competition trim, but this is a fun way to trim that allows you to get a lot of flavor into this and also get a lot of color all the way around. And then we're going to season it in our global flavor. We're actually going to do a Korean flavor profile on this. So I made a special rub for this, and then we have a sauce as well. So first we're going to start with just some of these as we look at a pork butt. So my biggest thing when I'm looking at pork butt, especially for competition, is I'm looking for that money muscle. It's the end opposite of the blade bone. And you can see how nicely marbled that is. And it's running a different direction than the rest of the fibers. So when I look at a pork butt, I'll be in the grocery store taking packages of pork butts and squeezing them like this. I'm sure people think I'm crazy. But I want to pick out ones that look good and have good size. And you can kind of feel them. They kind of go back this way a little bit. So you want to feel something that you want nice, good size, nice marbling. You want to look at that intramuscular fat. So that's where your moisture and flavor is really going to come from. Sometimes pork butts can get a little lean. So if it ends up lean, it's just going to dry out. So that's the first thing I look for. Next one, I want to look for the fat cap, which this one does not have much of a fat cap. So I would not probably look at this one for competition, because for competition, I'm looking to get that meat that's right under. And you can actually see that. This is that meat that's right under the thick fat cap. Competition, we call that the bacon. So typically, I would want to use that and turn in, but I need that fat cap to protect it. So this would not be a great competition butt, but it's going to work perfectly for what we're doing today. So my first step is I just want to start cleaning up this money muscle a little bit. Just any of this loose stuff, go ahead and take it off. And really what I'm trying to do is start to define what the money muscle looks like. So on this back side, you can see that pocket of fat right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cut that off. And some of this meat right here, it's really thin. It has a tendency to dry out. So I'm just going to cut that off. And now, of course, you can save that, make sausage, or just save it for to grind later. You can do a lot of things with that ground pork. And as I do competitions, I end up with a lot of this trim. So I'm always looking for different ways to use it up or give it away to people. So we're just going to kind of trace out this money muscle. We're not going to go crazy with this today because the way I'm going to trim, it's really going to frame that money mussel up nice and allow us to get nice, good color on it as we cook it. So that looks pretty good. Nothing else really on here is loose. So we're just going to continue trimming. So we're going to flip down here to the blade bone. And my first cut here is I'm just going to kind of put it right on the bone and just trace that out to the other side. And we're just going to kind of butterfly this open and we're going to lay it out flat. And so I'm going to cut down right to about the base of where that money mussel is. So you can see the money mussel right there. And then simply flip it over like that. Now what this does is it kind of gives you three pieces to cook that are similar in size. So these two, this still has a bone in it, but these are all going to cook evenly. So once this is done, it'll all be done. Everything gets color on it. We're exposing a lot of this meat so we can get seasoning all around it. I think that's one of the biggest things about pork butts is that there's so much meat if you just season it whole that does not get rub or seasoning on it. And you're missing out opportunities to get flavor in there. I'm just going to trim up some of this fat that's on here because we won't be able to penetrate seasoning through this. And this is not going to render out. We will lose some of it, but it's not going to render all the way out. So I'd rather just get rid of it now and be able to get more flavor onto the surface of this butt. Just take some of this off, not much there. And then I'm going to flip it over and same thing here. So you got some of this kind of thick fat in here that it's not going to render out. It's still going to be there once this thing's done and nobody wants to eat that. It's not edible. So we might as well get it out of there so we can get flavor all the way down in here and get that rub to stick. We'll just clean up some of this. There's some kind of thin stuff right there that we'll just get rid of. And then I'm just going to take kind of this whole back piece off because that's real thin and it's going to dry out. So there we go. So that's cleaned up pretty well. I'm going to put my trim over here. So now that we have it trimmed up, you have another option of a way to add more flavor onto this. And this is something that in competition I do with every piece of meat, and that's inject. So all I've done here is I took some chicken broth. I added, since we're doing a Korean profile, I added some gochujang, some Korean pepper paste to this broth with some agave. So I just wanted to get that sweet, spicy. And so actually my injector here is, I got this from Tractor Supply. This is actually for injecting medications into cattle, but it works really well for barbecue too. And a lot of barbecue cooks use these. And it's got a really small injection needle on it, which allows me to inject without leaving big holes. Some of those injectors have really big, thick needles. And when you slice, say if you're slicing the money mussel, you can actually see the hole left from where you injected. And I don't want that as part of my presentation when I'm turning in my blind box for a competition. So really all you have to do if you choose to inject is just kind of go through and just hit these spots. You're going to have a little bit of the injection come back out. You might have some squirt out the side or out the top. You might get some all over your kitchen. That's really nothing you can do about that. It's just part of injecting. It's kind of a messy process, but it is worth it in the end. When you butterfly the butt like this, injecting is not as crucial because we're going to be able to get a lot of flavor around the outside of this that when we shred this up, it's going to be nice and flavorful. But the injection helps add some moisture to your product. One thing I'm not doing with this one is there's a lot of injection bases on the market specifically for competition that contain phosphates and things to really lock the moisture in. They're usually packed with a lot of flavor enhancers as well as the phosphates. So those are options that if you choose to, especially if you're doing competition, is something you should definitely consider. But for home use, I usually don't use that. I'll just use just a flavorful liquid. And this is something too that you can use as part of your wrap or your braising liquid as well, which we'll get to that in a little bit. So next, we're going to rub this. We're going to season it up. So my seasoning blend for this is 2 parts Korean pepper flakes, 2 parts turbinado sugar, and 1 part kosher salt. So this is kind of a coarse, chunky rub. And I like that. It just, to me, it gives a little bit better flavor and look. This is not gonna, if you want something that's gonna kind of deliver a more kind of uniform, like thick, dark bark, like probably a lot of people are used to, you'll want to grind this up a little bit, or use some Korean pepper powder instead of the flakes, and that'll give you a little bit more of a uniform bark. This is going to be a little more chunky, but this is kind of the way I like to do it. I would not do it this way for competition. I would definitely, in competition, I make sure all my rubs are nice and ground up. I use a shaker like this with a small hole so that it's nice even coat, so it looks perfect. Also a tip for anybody out there when you're seasoning, if you keep your seasoning up high, you'll be able to manage your coverage much easier. You'll have a much more even coat and coverage, because you don't want big clumps and big piles of this on your pork. You want it to be even, consistent. We're just gonna give this a nice coat, get everything covered up here. And then this is something I would do at least an hour before you put it in the smoker. You want to give it a chance. You want to give the salt and sugar a chance to start pulling the moisture out of the meat, and that'll help set the rub, so that when it goes in the smoker, you'll start to form that bark. And when it comes to competition and bark, it's kind of not really a thing. From a competition standpoint, I don't really want a bark, because a bark changes the texture. If you think about how a bark is formed, you're kind of dehydrating the surface of this meat. It's drying out and it's forming a crust. So what happens there is that if you turn that into a judge, that dry piece is a different texture from the soft, moist pork, and they're gonna take off points for tenderness on that. So for competition purposes, I want everything to be nice, soft, same texture throughout, and full of moisture. So this is going to be ready to go on the smoker. I'm going to set this to the side for now, and we'll get started on our ribs. Just going to change out my board. All right, so for our ribs, we're starting.
I don't know if you mentioned earlier, what kind of a smoker are you using today?
So this is a cook shack. So it's an electric smoker. It has heating coils in the bottom, and it has a tray where you can put wood chips in. So I have these wood chips here, so that's what I'm using. It's a good smoker. It's you know, this model, it doesn't hold a temperature steady. It kind of fluctuates as it goes through, which is fine. It works. Again, it's just that you have to know your smoker. You have to kind of know the way it's going to work, and just make your product fit, your cooking method and style fit to what that is.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we're going to start with our ribs. So this is a St. Louis cut. These are St. Louis spare ribs. And again, if I was looking at these from a competition standpoint, it's got pretty good marbling in here. You can see nice marbling, the striations in that. I would say these are probably a little bit thin for competition. I'd like to see a little bit thicker, a little bit more meat on these. But overall, this is a decent rack. I probably wouldn't be afraid to use these in a competition if I needed to. What we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to trim it up a little bit. Especially for competition, I don't need all these bones. When it comes to turn-ins, I'm looking for really these 4 center ribs. So I'm going to just go ahead and cut that off, and then I'm usually going to go about 10 bones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I'll cut there. So now this gets this down. That's a little bit more manageable. And then I'm going to look to see if any of this skirt's still on here. And if it is, I'm just going to trim that off, because again, this is going to be, as it cooks, this will end up cooking at a different rate, and so it's going to end up drying out. So there's no need in keeping it on there. So then we're going to take the membrane off. So the membrane is, you can cook it with the membrane on. Depending on how much it cooks, it might get a little kind of crispy or a little chewy. But the real big problem with the membrane is it won't let the seasoning through. So the real purpose of removing the membrane is really just so you can season the backside of those ribs and get as much flavor through every bit of it as possible. So this one right here, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there's kind of two membranes on here. When you remove the one on the outside, and usually there's still one on the inside that's kind of holding these together. This one's already kind of torn, so that rib, that's just going to blow out and not really be any good. So I'm just going to cut that off now that I see that. Any little bit of fat on this backside, we'll try to get off. All right, we'll flip them over and see what we're looking like here. Any thick fat around the top there, we'll look to remove that, because that's not going to, again, that's not going to render out, and it's just going to leave a piece of fat there. And that's not always a good bite for a judge or for your guest eating it. Otherwise, these are in pretty good shape. Give that a little trim there. And then the other thing I want to do is I just want to look kind of square these up, and these aren't bad. These are pretty straight. I'll just take a knife and just kind of cut down on the soft side of these, of the cartilage, and just kind of trim those up and clean them up just a touch. I'm gonna save my trim here. Ooh. So for our ribs, we're gonna make char siu, so Chinese roast pork. So we're gonna season these. We're actually gonna marinate these in a char siu marinade. So that is a combination of Chinese cooking wine, hoisin sauce, oyster sauce, some garlic, some brown sugar, and then some red food coloring. So we're using that red food coloring to get that classic look of the bright red color on the pork. This is going to be different than what you might see in other char siu recipes, because we're gonna cook these like spare ribs. So we're gonna cook these like you would cook in a competition, or you would cook a normal rack of spare ribs. So they will change a little bit. They're not going to look exactly like a char siu. But all we need to do is to start the marinade. Typically, I would get a big Ziploc bag, or put a sheet of plastic down here. But essentially, so I've got my marinade already mixed together. So I really just going to pour that over. Just kind of rub it in. We just want to make sure we get good coverage. And then this is going to marinate for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. This is a newer recipe, so I'm still kind of playing with the total time. The more time you give it, the more you're actually going to start to cure the ribs a little bit and cure the pork. So you'll get a little bit of a different texture when it comes out of the marinade. So I'm really just trying to dial that in. I initially started playing around with this recipe after I went to a restaurant in Boston called Fat Baby Sushi, and they had a Chinese spare ribs with broccoli, and they took country style ribs and just sliced them into thin strips and marinated them in this, and then just quickly grilled them over charcoal and just kind of charred them up, and it was delicious. And ever since then, I started at home with the country ribs, but then now I've moved to playing around with spare ribs. So this is a recipe I'm still working on. So one of the key seasonings in that char siu is Chinese 5-spice. So I put a little bit in the marinade, but I wanted to pull some out because I want to actually put a little bit on top here. This will both help with our color, but also add a little extra pop of flavor. So one important thing in barbecue is really layering flavor and kind of figuring out different ways to get as much flavor, but bringing it in different stages can really make a difference. So these are ready to go in the smoker as well. Again, you can inject these ribs if you'd like to. I always thought it was weird to inject ribs, but of course, with competition barbecue looking for an edge, I inject ribs to this day now. I still feel odd when I'm injecting ribs because it just doesn't seem like they can hold that much extra moisture. It's thin, but you'd be surprised how much moisture you can force into a rib, and it does make a difference. So it's definitely worth doing if you're doing competition. So now,
Chef, I do have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't have a smoker at home, what would you advise for someone who still wants to smoke barbecue at home for non-competition purposes?
I would fire up your oven, and I would use your oven and just match the temperature of what you want to cook at. And then as far as from a smoke and a flavor standpoint, typically I would just incorporate some smoked paprika into my rub, and that'll give you some of that smoke flavor. And then there's plenty of barbecue sauces out there that have a nice smoke flavor built into them. But again, if you're making your own barbecue sauce at home, again, a little bit of smoked paprika will go a long way to adding some additional flavor. Personally, I would stay away from liquid smoke. I'm just not a big fan of it. It can tend to go sideways and get pretty strong. But I would definitely use or smoked paprika to help enhance that smoke flavor. But any of these recipes and any kind of barbecue, you can always do in the oven. The other thing that I like, that I used to do a lot at home, and I still do sometimes, is I'll get my color and my smoke in the smoker, and then I'll wrap it and I'll just throw it in the oven. And it's just, your oven's going to stay at constant temperature. You don't have to fool with trying to keep your, if it's a stick burner, keep the temperature at a constant as you go, as you wrap. So I'll utilize my oven at home as well once I've got it wrapped, because you're not going to really do anything with flavor once it's wrapped at that point. All right, so now we're going to move into, so I've got everything in the smoker. I've got my ribs in, I've got my pork in. So our next step is we're actually going to wrap these. So with my competition barbecue, several years ago, I got tired of cooking low and slow. I was putting my meat on at night, going to bed, not sleeping really good, worried about what was happening, kind of having nightmares about the smoker caught on fire or something weird was happening. So I started researching and talking to people and wanted to start going hot and fast. So that's really one of the new trends in barbecue, especially in competition barbecue, is cooking hot and fast. So going opposite of what everybody knows of barbecue, which is that low and slow. So this smoker, it maxes out at 300 degrees. So that's as high as I can go. With my cabinet smoker that I have for competition, I cook at 315. There was one comp I overslept, so I cooked at 330. Again, you have control of your cook, so do things that you need to do to make it work as you need it. If you oversleep, that's, you got to crank temp up and run. Drum smoker, I run at like 300. So everybody kind of has their own, but the hot and fast is, in my opinion, definitely the way to go. I've gotten much more consistent results, but there are some things you have to keep in mind when you're going hot and fast. First of all is cooking barbecue or cooking any kind of meat that's a slow, a braised item, something that does a lot of work, is it's all about time and temperature. How long is that a certain temperature over that amount of time to start breaking down the fibers and the collagen? So when you're cooking hot and fast, the temperature is going up really quickly. So it's not internally, it does not have a long time at those lower temperatures. So it's really rushing through. So that means your finish temp is going to be a lot higher. Brisket, pork, cooking hot and fast, cooking at 300 plus, your finish temp may be around 208, 210 Fahrenheit internal. Whereas if you're cooking low and slow at 225, 250, you might be more around 195, 200 internal. So you have to keep that in mind, because that's going to change the way you check. But again, at the end of the day, I don't really check for temperature. I check for doneness. And I'll show you when we get to the finish point. I use the thermometer, but a lot of times I don't even turn it on. I'm just kind of poking and prodding and seeing where it's tender. And the probe should be able to go in and out with little to no resistance. And that's really how you know that it's finished and it's ready to come out. So we're going to start first with our pork. So it is ready to come out of the smoker. So I like to use disposable pans, just less dishes to deal with. So we've got our pork out of the smoker here. And so you can see with it butterflied out, we've got color all over. So even on the bottom side, we've got nice color. And so this is what you want to cook to. You want to cook to color, especially if you're going to wrap. You don't wrap after 3 hours, because it might take you 3.5 to get to this color. You don't want to wrap at 3 hours, because you might get to this color in 2 hours. So you want to check and see what the color is. You want to get to your final color, and then you can take it out and wrap it. I don't really care what the temp of this thing is right now. A lot of people say wrap at 165. I don't really care. It doesn't make any difference to me because I'm gonna wrap the color, and then once I go back in and I'm just gonna check on it. So, and you can also, after you wrap, you can leave a thermometer in with a a probe to kind of monitor the temp as it's cooking. But once you kind of get used to it, it's easy just to check on it. So in my wrap, I'm going to add some sauce in here. So I made kind of a Korean style barbecue sauce. Started with ketchup, then added the gochujang, the Korean pepper paste, some apple juice, apple cider vinegar, brown sugar, garlic, ginger, and a little bit of sesame oil. So I'm going to put about a cup or so down. And just put that down at the bottom. I don't want to pour the sauce over top of this because I want to keep my appearance. I want to keep this looking nice. Like this, and I'm gonna have to squeeze this in this pan, which is fine. That'll help it cook evenly, just kind of bunch it together there. So I got my sauce on the bottom, and now for my kind of glaze to get this kind of shiny and going, I'm just gonna use some agave. You could also use honey. I like agave just because it's a little milder flavor. It adds the sweetness without the strong honey flavor. So we'll just go some agave on top of here. And then we will wrap that up. And so if you wanted to put a probe in and leave it in there, now's the time to stick a probe. Usually you want to stick it in the kind of the thickest part. Typically I would stick it in the money muscle that's right here on top because I don't want to overcook that. The other sides of this, if you overcook a little bit, you've got some room for error, but if you overcook the money muscle, it'll get mushy on you and you don't want that. So, but we'll put this back in. And again, you're gonna be a couple hours before that's ready. So no need to worry. Now we're gonna move to our ribs. So for ribs, when I'm wrapping ribs, so first I'm using 2 sheets of foil, mostly just because I want to have a barrier in case, a corner pokes out or something. 2 sheets usually is good enough to do that. I'm doing it on top of a sheet pan because I'm gonna be pouring liquid in here. And when you just have foil let out, it can run everywhere. So the sheet pan just kind of helps capture, make sure everything stays in place so you don't have to worry about making a mess. Barbecue can be pretty messy, so no point in adding to it. So one thing I want to show you is, so on these ribs, you can see right there, I'm not sure you can tell, but well, first of all, I can rub my finger on these and nothing is moving. So that little bit of rub is set in nice, but it's a little dry right there. So as I go through the cook, I have just a little squirt bottle here. This one has a little bit of apple juice and apple cider vinegar mixed together. For competition, I just use water because I don't want to, sometimes it needs to be sprayed, sometimes it doesn't. So I just want water just so it's neutral and I'm not going to change the flavor because again, competition, I'm looking for consistency and I want to be able to know exactly what I'm doing every time. But with something like this, a little bit of apple juice, a little apple cider vinegar is nice. And you just want to keep it moist as it's smoking. Depending on your smoker, it's going to act a little different. One of my smokers I have, it has a water pan in it. So it has a lot of steam through the cook. So things don't really get that dry. But this smoker does not, so it tends to dry out a little bit. So we'll flip the ribs over meat side down, and now is a good time that if there's any kind of burnt, crispy bits, any like where the marrows come out of the bones, now is a good time to remove that. Those are the things that can kind of poke holes in your foil and you can lose your wrap, but they also probably don't taste that good. So it's good to get those off now, and you also don't want them to fall off and end up in your wrap later because we're going to be using that sauce when we're finished. So another good thing you can do now, and this is purely to help your presentation later, is you can go ahead and just kind of press in between the bones, and this will help that bone pull at the end. So it's barely done enough to even let loose, but if you just let it go a little bit, this will really start to encourage those the meat to draw down from the bone, and it'll give you that kind of signature look that a judge or just somebody that knows barbecue ribs is going to be looking for those bones to be kind of poking out a little bit. It's really just for presentation and aesthetics. It's not going to affect your flavor or your tenderness. I'll just clean those up. So after I pulled those ribs from the marinade, I saved the marinade. So now we're going to use that marinade and we're going to pour it right over top and just make sure that gets all over. Now we're going to wrap these up. And a lot of times, if you cook ribs a lot, you'll know sometimes that the bones will kind of blow out and kind of start to pour out early. I don't know a sure way to stop that, but one way that I've been working and seeing some success is wrapping it very tightly. It seems as if there might be something to that. I really don't know, but of late, I've been trying to wrap them as tight as possible, and that kind of helps, or at least it seems to help with those blowouts. So I want to wrap that up as tight as I can, and then we'll go back in the smoker with that. And then those will just cook. And again, periodically, I'd probably give it at least an hour, hour and a half before I go back in, but I'll go in and check, and I'll just pull the foil back and just kind of poke around and see what it feels like. Typically at an hour and a half, especially with the pork, I know it's probably not going to be done, but that's when I want to start to get an idea. I may actually look at what the temperature is just to start to get an idea of where it's at, so I can start thinking of, okay, I need to check it in 30 minutes, maybe an hour. The ribs are going to go much quicker, so you'll want to really pay attention to those. And I'll show you here shortly kind of some clues in how you might know when your ribs are done. Ribs are very difficult. I'll be honest, it's one of the meats that I'm struggling with right now in competitions. So if anybody on here has got some tips for me, that might be helpful. So we are going to start with our finished product. So I've got my pork here. And so this was in the smoker. I put this in the smoker earlier this morning. Probably took about 5 hours total. And it was tender. So you can see how I can go in and out, and there's not really any resistance. You can kind of see with that liquid that's in the pan, it's not really moving much as I go in and out with the probe. So that's how you tell when it's done. I have no idea what temperature this is. I really don't care. It's probably around 204, 205. But you can tell that that's super tender. So we'll grab another cutting board.
Chef, I have a question of, will you have recipes available for participants to use afterwards?
Yes, I will provide recipes. I will throw one caveat out there though. Again, if based on your smoker, these are going to be different, but the recipes will have the char siu marinade ingredients and amounts, and then it'll have the barbecue sauce and the rub amounts, which are important. But again, there'll be very vague guidance on time, temperature, all that kind of stuff, because really that's going to be very dependent on the type of smoker you're using and that type of thing. So just keep that in mind.
We know you just don't want to share your trade secrets, so you don't have someone to compete against you.
Well, Chef Chris, you had mentioned I should do a barbecue demo or like a competition barbecue, and I was not willing to do that. I've invested a lot of time and money, so I'm not going to give that all away for free. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this money muscle. And so, from a restaurant standpoint, it's kind of hard to do anything with the money muscle because out of that, it was probably an 8-pound pork butt. That's all the money muscle you get. So it's kind of hard to sell that in any kind of volume unless you're cooking a ton of butts. But if you're, just cooking at home or competition, this is definitely a special cut. This is one of, I would say, besides the cheeks of the pig, this is the best cut from the pig. It's super tender, super flavorful. No matter what you're doing, and anytime I do barbecue for friends, family, or if that's at a contest and it's a people's choice, I tend to save the money muscle for myself because why not? A lot of people don't know what it is anyway, so they don't know what they're missing. So I'm just going to take this, and if I were at a competition, my first cut would be this end piece, and that's just for me to taste and check the tenderness, and that's delicious. The other thing, competition, I usually use an electric knife because this thing is so tender that it's actually hard to cut with just a slicer because it just wants to crumble. And the really fast vibrating serrated knife actually works really well. So another thing with competition is the more tender it is, the thicker slice I'll make. And that's just because it gives you a better chew. If it's thick, if it's super tender and thin, it's just going to crumble. And this one is super, super tender. As you can tell, I'm kind of having a hard time getting through with this knife. There you go. This one's probably just a touch overcooked, but it's still delicious. Yeah, it's a little crumbly. There you go. And so that Korean rub gives a really nice kind of sweet, savory with a little bit of heat. It's not super hot, but you taste those chilies and it gives a really nice, bold, little kind of punch to it. And then the sauce is the same thing. It's nice, sweet, savory, but the sauce has got a little bit more kick. I did add a good bit of gochujang to that. So for the rest of this, so one of your true tests for if pork is done is if you can pull that blade bone out clean. And so, yeah, that one's pretty good. There's a little piece left on there though. But that's pretty good. That's what you're looking for, is you want that to pull out clean with no meat on it. So for this, really all you want to do, I like to leave it a little bit chunky. If you're serving this just kind of on a platter, I like to have some bigger pieces. If you're making sandwiches, you can shred it a little bit more. But this is that point where you can see, even though we got rub on both sides, there's still a lot of that meat that doesn't have rub on it. So what I like to do, and this is something, again, that I do in competition, is I'll take my rub, which is that one right there, the coarse one, and I'll put it in a spice grinder, and I'll grind it up really fine. And then you can kind of sprinkle that on this unseasoned portion of the meat, mix it in, and because it's ground up really fine, it melts in instantly. And so you don't get any of that kind of dry, kind of chalky or gritty mouthfeel or taste to it. So I've got some of that in the shaker. And so I'll just simply do a light coat, kind of mix that in. Go a little heavier.
Greg, what are your thoughts on the 3-2-1 method for ribs?
It sounds good. It sounds like a great idea. And it's descending order, 3-2-1, but I mean, what temperature? I don't know, it doesn't give you a temperature to cook at. So if you do 3-2-1 at 250 versus 300, that's going to be very different. That also doesn't take into account, are you cooking a whole spare? Are you cooking St. Louis style spares? Are you cooking baby backs? They all cook different. So you really can't, you can use it as guidance. It's fine to, and trust me, when I was first learning, I did 3-2-1 and I thought it was amazing, but now I know a lot more than I did then. You really have to, there are no shortcuts really. You have to just kind of do it, figure it out. But then at the same time, a pork butt you buy today or a rack of ribs you buy today might cook different than one you buy next week. As I look back through my book and my notes, I'll see 15 to 45 minute variations on doneness, and like it's just part of it. So you never really know, but I would definitely, you've got to pick whatever temperature you think you want to start cooking at, and then you've got to do some cooks, and you got to start making your own time method. It's just, I think it's fine to start that way, but you've got to pay attention and you really kind of learn what you're doing if you really want to get better and make the best food possible. In my opinion, that's the only way you're going to get better at cooking in general, honestly. I mean, that goes with anything. You can't always just follow a method or a recipe. Sometimes you've got to figure it out on your own and do what works, because not everything's always going to work. So our pork is done. I'm going to set that aside, and then we'll plate up a dish over here, but I'm going to get to the ribs. So with this rack, I've already taken some of the liquid out of here, and I just put it in a pot over here. And I added a little bit of agave or honey, and then I just reduced it a little bit just to start to make a little bit of a syrup. So you can see here, so you can see like those ribs blew out a little bit. So like I said, sometimes there's not much you can do. But you can see this got pretty good color. I probably could have left this in a little bit longer. You're going to lose color in the wrap with all that liquid in there. It's going to get a little bit pale versus what you put it in. So I probably could have put this in left this in a little longer initially. But they smell great. That Chinese 5-Spice, very aromatic and kind of hits you right in the nose as soon as you open this packet. So I like to slice my ribs meat side down just so I can see the bones and I can just make nice even cuts. And the other thing about ribs is sometimes the bones are straight. So you want to try to follow the contour of the ribs. So you're cutting into the meat and not cutting against or at the bone. So just nice, smooth, and this is a really quicker one. Nice, smooth, just draw out. And these feel really good. They're nice and tender. Don't have to really, not much resistance whatsoever, just kind of sliding back the knife and they're cutting right through. So we're going to take these and we're going to glaze them. So there's different ways you can do this. So I'm going to actually, so we'll flip these back over. So typically for competition, actually this rib's broken. So for competition, I'd be looking at these kind of center 4 ribs. Those are probably going to be the most meaty and most tender. Now, unfortunately, I lost one. As you can see, the bone is actually broken. So I wouldn't want to turn that in or really give that to anybody. But you could still pull the meat off and it'd be good. So again, if I were looking at these for competition, I'd take my knife and I'd try to square up the bottom of these. And these are a little crumbly, but there you go. Just so that everything's nice and even. You want it to look perfect. Because one of your scoring criteria is appearance. And to me, those are free points that you should be getting every time, because that is really the only thing in your control. It's the easiest thing to control is what it looks like. So I'm just going to put some of this glaze on here. And then I'm going to take these right behind me and throw them on the grill. And then I'll just brush the backside a little bit. And I'll just give those a minute to char up, get a little extra color on them, and to set that glaze. So while those are cooking, so I've got some sliders here with a little bit of kimchi and some potato chips, and then I made some kimchi pickles. So I just made a simple pickle brine, some rice wine vinegar, salt, sugar, and some of the Korean pepper flakes. Cooked it to dissolve the salt and sugar, and then chilled it, and then sliced English cucumbers, seedless cucumbers in with some of the kimchi in there. So it makes a really nice, really flavorful, nice tangy pickle that pairs well with the fatty pork. And then we'll just take some of our sauce and just kind of spoon over top of there. So that makes for a nice little slider. Goes well for lunch or a cookout. Now for our ribs, so I'm going to place this similar as the way I got it at the restaurant in Boston. So serve it with some white rice, some grilled broccolini or baby broccoli. Let me grab these ribs. These ribs are super, super tender, probably even a little too tender for competition. So you want your ribs, even if you're just doing it at home, you want them really tender, You don't necessarily want them to fall off the bone, but you want them close. Oh, and one other tip, when you're dealing with hot food, especially like pulled pork, ribs, and stuff in barbecue, put a pair of cotton gloves under your latex or nitrile gloves, and it can help protect your hands, so you don't have to burn your hands, and you can handle the food properly. Definitely a tip that was a game changer when I figured that one out. And a lot of this is you learn from others, and you learn by watching and talking and asking questions. So there you have it.
Looks fantastic, Chef. I'm extremely jealous, and anytime I get to have your barbecue is a good day. And here I am in Jacksonville, Florida, without your barbecue, so I'm a little upset right now.
Yeah, well, it reminded me when I started this today. The last barbecue demo came live from Kansas City, Missouri, which is obviously very well known from barbecue. Of course, we're coming live today from Camden, New Jersey, which is not a barbecue hotspot or known for barbecue, but that's why I've come up with my own style of barbecue. And it's hard to find good barbecue in this area, so I tend to just make it myself.
Well, you do a great job, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time today. So, any closing thoughts, Chef?
I would just say, if you're going to go out and cook barbecue, it does take time, it takes effort. So have fun, enjoy it. Don't get too stressed out about it. You might not always make the best thing. You might make mistakes. Just learn from it and continue to improve. And yeah, I think any day you're out cooking barbecue is better than the day you're not cooking barbecue.
Words well said. Well, thanks, Chef, and a huge virtual round of applause, everyone, as we thank Chef Greg Boggs for a very informative presentation. We appreciate taking the time to share your insights with everyone on modern barbecue. Thanks, Chef. Please be on the lookout for the survey you'll receive in the next day or so, which you'll need to complete to earn your continuing education hours. We hope you'll all join us for our next webinar on June 12th as we discuss June's trend with a panel of food truck experts. Then on July 2nd, for our trend on global pantry, Savor Imports will present on sourcing food from every corner of the globe. We also look forward to seeing you all at the ACF National Convention in Phoenix, July 14th to 17th. It's going to be the can't miss culinary education event of the year for sure. To learn more about the upcoming webinars in the ACF National Convention, visit acfchefs.org and click on the events tab. On behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to our presenter and sponsors for bringing us the opportunity, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.